Welcome.
Hello!
Ooh.
Welcome to
sound of a
Dungeons and
ghost.
Dragons Time Talks. I'm your host, Spooky Jeremy.
I'm your host, Salty Pete.
How you doing, Pete?
Best intro yet. I'm doing great. I'm genuinely really excited about talking about Ghosts of Saltmarsh today. And that's today's
Oh my goodness, I am as well.
A new book has just come out. Me and Jeremy both have it. It was express delivered to us via Amazon Prime, which you can subscribe to us on Twitch via Amazon Prime. I highly recommend the service and using that if you don't have it.
Have DnDTime delivered right to your door.
Your door. Yeah. This is the book. I'm very excited to talk about it, and it's the newest adventure book from Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah. Well, before we go too deep into it, just a little brief explanation. DnDTime Talks is a show where we discuss all things Dungeons and Dragons. Today's a little bit of a review, I guess you could call it. It's not going to be a full review. We're not going to talk about the entirety of this book. We're going to be talking mostly about Chapter 1, which is about the town of Saltmarsh. We'll go into more detail later. And the appendices, which are all of the cool new rules and such for Oceanic campaigns. We're going to lightly touch on the 7 adventure modules that are in this book, but we're not going to go into a lot of detail, so don't worry. This is going to be very spoiler light to maybe even spoiler free, depending.
If we're going to go into a territory where it feels like it could be spoilerish, we'll
let you know.
Tell you in advance.
Exactly. And of course, feel free to join in with the discussion in the chat if you're hanging around and have something you want to say, you want to add. This is going to be a lot of Pete and I's opinions of this book, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Who we think it'd be helpful for and useful for, and what we like about it, what parts of it we are inspired by. So, without further ado, Pete, let's dive right into Ghosts of Saltmarsh.
Actually, one more brief comment. Also, at the end of the stream, we always do Ask Pete and Jeremy. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask me and Jeremy, be they D&D related or otherwise, you can find the link to our Discord below. Up on our Discord, ask us a silly question. We'll answer them at the end of the stream. Yes, let's dive into Saltmarsh, as it were.
Absolutely. So I mentioned it briefly. This book, brand new adventure module, came out 4 days ago now. Wizards of the Coast made this for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. And a little background on the book before we dive in. This is an adventure book. It's just like, it's not like Tales from the Yawning Portal. It's designed in the same manner. It's got 7 adventures that can be played independently. But unlike Tales from the Yawning Portal, this book is incredibly good. Tales from the Yawning Portal is okay, but this is a very, very good book. I think that's how I'm going to start off my side.
They definitely took a lot of the ideas that Tales from the Yawning Portal put out and trying to put together this collage book, and they found a way to do it and make it way better by kind of unifying it. But I think we'll talk more about the way the town of Saltmarsh kind of unifies the book and is the overarching campaign almost of it, even though it's all these mini adventures.
Yeah, so starting off, the book the book has, 8 chapters and 3 appendices. So chapter 1 is Saltmarsh. It is just a full-blown review of the town of Saltmarsh. It's got all of the different political machinations going on in the town. A lot of NPCs are fleshed out. Locations are fleshed out in detail. And it's really good. Chapter 2 through 8, actually, so every other main chapter of the book are adventures.
Yep.
The adventures most of them are older adventures that have been updated to 5th edition D&D. So if you've been around for a long time, you might recognize a few. But a few of them are fairly new. I believe Salvage Operation was never published, but I might be wrong.
I'm unsure with the history on it, but
yeah. And then the 3 appendices are Appendix A is of Ships and Sea. It's all about running a nautical themed adventure, kind of the stuff we've been talking about on Talks for the last 3 weeks. Appendix B is magic items, and I think it's 1 page. It's really short.
Yeah, I think there's about 5 magic items. There's one that I really liked that I think we could probably talk about. We'll get to that eventually. And then Appendix C is the monsters, all of the creatures that are used in the book and the various adventures that I believe, it's only specifically the ones I believe that haven't been published before. Are there any repeats in there?
Oh, if they're published in a book that is not the monster manual, they're in there. So if there was a creature from Vol's Guide to Monsters, for example, which I think there are a couple, they are republished in the back of this book.
Yeah, it only assumes the monster manual. Yeah, you're right about that, I think.
But speaking of the monsters,
some cool stuff in there.
Just right up front, look at this fella. We're gonna zoom out for a second. So here we are, Ghosts of Saltmarsh. This is the front cover. First of all, awesome cover here, right? It's got the cool everything. Everything's great. Just very good. Just looks neat. It's got a kraken in the background. There's
and then
a ship.
You open up this book and you get to meet this fella. Jeremy will see it better on screen, but it's the first page. This is how it starts. Is with this delightful character.
It's beautiful. If you don't love this character, you're doing something wrong. It's such a good, wholesome, just happy fish dude. He's got an otter for a pet. It's amazing. This is one of the delightful kind of monsters, you could call them, but they're NPCs that you can meet throughout these.
Yeah, Max Meister was asking if it's a new race of fish people. It's not a character race, but it is kind of a new race in a sense.
Oh, is chat going on? I do not see chat. Interesting. Chat is showing up as blank for me.
Oh, yeah, there's chat going on. And
I apologize, chat. I would have said hello to you if it was showing up. OBS, you salty dog.
Appropriate for the day that OBS would be smuggling our chat away.
Sure, Pete.
Yeah, it's a fine segue. Because I think where we're going to start, actually, before we get into, I think even before we get into chapter 1, let's just be upfront and clear about it. What do you think of this book, Jeremy?
Pete, I think that this book is a new paradigm in Dungeons and Dragons books. Like, legitimately, I think that this is the way that D&D books should be written from now going forward. They did such a great job in chapter 1 outlining the town of Saltmarsh, the little political and socioeconomic backdrop to it, the main factions in the town, important NPCs, locations, and not just it's a town, it's a place, and here is one defining thing about it, but really flushing out those locations and giving them meaning in the context of the town. This first chapter, which, all right, we scroll a little further down. Like, actually, let's just hear we're at the table of contents, right? The first chapter is, 30 pages? Goes from chapter 7 to 36.
Yeah, about that.
It is such a good 30 pages. It is a joy to read. It's excellent. I didn't go and read every single NPC in there simply because I know I'm going to be running. I'm not running. I'm probably going to be playing in some of the Saltmarsh. So I didn't want to totally spoil myself. But yeah, they're very good.
I know, Jeremy, you read a little bit of chapter 2 through 8, but I personally haven't even touched it because I wanted to kind of stay distant from it in case I was going to play in it at some point. So I think we're on the same page there. But yeah, so we're touching on, and just to be clear, also, I'm in agreement. It's extremely good. Jeremy has said about as much as you can about it, but it's excellent. 100% on the same page. So I want to start talking about Saltmarsh, chapter 1.
Yeah. So as we dive in, right? Well, first, actually, this book is one of the first books headed by Kate Welch, a relatively new employee at Wizards of the Coast, and she nailed it. So kudos to you, Kate, if you ever see this. But yeah, Saltmarsh, awesome setup. Immediately diving into a little bit of political backdrop here. We have about half a page of it.
Yeah, it feels like it sets up it sets up the time period and what the political climate is in Saltmarsh and kind of the surrounding region. I believe the kingdom is called Killland, for
Yes.
what it's worth, and the surrounding kingdom of Kyoland and how those politics of the country that Saltmarsh is a part of are beginning to affect Saltmarsh. So it paints a scene of well, conflict, and creates this kind of central conflict that is going to kind of seemingly wrap its way through most of the adventures, is the impression I get, though I have not read them.
Yeah, and let's take a brief minute to talk about this, because when this book was first kind of being spoiled and Wizards was talking about it, they were talking about Saltmarsh being a setting agnostic adventure set or book, right? This whole book would be setting agnostic, you use it anywhere. And that is half true. The book completely goes through everything, all of Saltmarsh, all of the adventures, assuming that you are playing in the world of Greyhawk. All of the political backdrop is Greyhawk, and that's fine, because the base political backdrop, the important parts of what makes the adventure the adventure, or makes the adventures the adventures, and Saltmarsh could easily be transposed into any setting, but the book firmly establishes, yeah, we're assuming you're playing this in Greyhawk. So just want to get that out there right off the back. Everything about the Kingdom of Kyoland and everything, there's some Greyhawk in the lore.
Greyhawk.
Greyhawken.
I like Greyhawkish. But there, as Jeremy was saying, it's also very easily transposed. I think you could just, you could take a lot of the ideas that are going on in Saltmarsh as we get into them, because you don't move much in the book from, again, my viewpoint from what I've seen, beyond Saltmarsh and a few very small surrounding regions. So you could just take the town and pull it out of Greyhawk and throw it somewhere else, but it wouldn't have quite the same context with, the official factions and stuff.
Yeah, you'd have to do a little tinkering.
But the factions are where they kind of start. They establish this political backdrop, and then they begin talking about the various groups and who's kind of, who are the most prominent figures in Saltmarsh that are members of these groups. And they are really solid. A lot of what we've talked about in previous talks, when we were talking about specifically ocean factions, we're like, yeah, there's probably going to be a Navy faction, a pirate faction, and then some other miscellaneous one that's kind of a wild card. They did almost exactly that, but they have a ton of nuance.
Yeah, they give you a ton of detail to them, and they give you at least 2 or 3 NPCs that firmly are on the side of one of those factions, give them a lot of detail and a lot of context in the town. So in the case of Saltmarsh, we're going to touch lightly, I think, on these, because there's so much to go over.
And there's also, I think one of them is kind of spoilery.
Yeah, well, they have the Traditionalists, which they're just a faction that want the town of Saltmarsh to stay the way it is. They kind of fit under that pirate faction because smugglers fit in with that category. The town, these people see smuggling as a harmless crime, a victimless crime, rather, because it only hurts the government, not them. And that's the Traditionalists. They make a lot of sense. They feel like a real faction. Like, if this were a real town, these would be actual people. There would be people who feel like this. And it kind of fits with the war-torn backdrop of the city.
The next faction that they put out are the Loyalists, which are those that are basically, they are the most directly in opposition to the Traditionalists. These are your more crown-influenced and more larger government-influenced individuals. And they establish those as, like, for example, most of the guard in town are Loyalists because they're paid not by the town of Saltmarsh, but by the greater kingdom at large. There's an entire kind of faction of dwarves and this kind of influx of people that are trying to build up the town of Saltmarsh that are considered Loyalists because they're in service of the crown and not just trying to protect the town. And these are the two kind of primary combative forces that are butting heads in Saltmarsh in the way that they've laid it out here.
Yeah, and it ties back to the law versus chaos, right? The law of the government versus the freedom of we are just a town. We want to be on our own. It's a cool. You can make connections with that all over in the real world and in history everywhere. So it works really well. It sets a really good backdrop for when conflict happens. Neither side is just good or evil.
And they do a really good job. Well, yeah, I was gonna say they do a really good job of creating characters that are defined by their factions, but like there isn't one character in either of those two factions that I read through and felt like I disliked. For example, if I was watching it from a cinematic perspective and this were like a movie that was just playing out, if I was introduced to all of these characters, they all have some very interesting and cool qualities, and I can kind of see all of their viewpoints.
Yeah, none of them are painted as the villain, and that's, I think, a really important part of setting up the town and setting up the setting and the backdrop for all the adventures that are to follow. And one of the things that's great about this is they give you enough detail about, so for example, this is one of the NPCs here, Eleander Fireborn. We have, a little bit of text here and a little bit up there. And that's everything about Eleander Fireborn. And it's awesome. It is enough detail for you to understand the character, know how to role play them, which is very important. Past adventures, I know, haven't been that good. Get their motivations, how they feel about the town of Saltmarsh and certain and conflicts that happen there. And without going overboard, because you could also write like a 10-page thesis on Eleander Fireborn, and no one would want to read that. It's a really good starting place, whether you're an experienced dungeon master or if you're brand new to the game. And that's something that we're going to keep running into as we go through this book, is great for new players as well, because it's so clear about all the characters, how they fit in. It's very well organized.
And we mentioned that there were 3 factions. The third one, I don't think we want to touch on too much. And so this will be perhaps a light spoiler. So if you don't want to have anything spoiled, you might not want to listen to this next couple words. But to summarize it in about a sentence, there's kind of a third faction called the Scarlet Brotherhood. That's a more villainous faction that's kind of trying to pit the 2 other factions against each other. And that thread is something that it seems like the book's going to be using throughout its entirety. I think they actually explicitly say in chapter 1 that you could write a campaign threading together all of the future adventures built around this third faction as kind of a core villain.
Yeah, and for all of the factions, they also give this nice little section for the faction at play. So here we have the Loyalists at play. The Loyalists are focused on 2 things: ensuring that the Dwarven Mine is successful. There's a new Dwarven Mine in Saltmarsh. That's kind of the core backdrop there. And clamping down on smuggling to keep the Sea Princes in check. And the Sea Princes are a rival pirate empire, basically, that threatens Saltmarsh. The mine is the most precious commodity in the region for this faction, and its members will do anything they can to support it. If word of any Sea Prince activity reaches the Loyalists, they're quick to meet the threat. And then it gives a whole bunch of sample events, and it's amazing.
Oh, these are so good.
This is a perfect way for, oh my god, I want to introduce my faction. Or my players really aren't getting that these factions, are unique and different. These are awesome, just right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. 8 different ways, 8 different sample events that really put the Loyalists up front and get the players to recognize them and think like, oh, this is a unique faction. They will just get it, even if they're not thinking in those terms. You want to talk about a couple of these, Pete?
Yeah, I'd love to. Let's talk about some of the traditionalist ones, because I like these.
Oh, sure.
Here's an example one. Gellin Prime Water imports a variety of exotic flowers that he uses to decorate the town, while also distributing fresh tropical fruit free of charge to the townsfolk. This is Gellin Prime Water is one of the the sample characters that they give you for the traditionalist faction. So for one thing, it's great that they're tying it back into these core characters that they've told you to use and giving you a direct example of something this character would do. But beyond that, this is a character that is essentially he's a pirate. He's a noble in town that kind of lives a very lavish lifestyle and uses his merchant ships as a cover for piracy. But he loves the town and he's a member of these Loyalists, and this is a demonstration that despite perhaps his flamboyance, he has a genuine love for Saltmarsh, and he wants like the people of Saltmarsh to be happy. It's like a very straight up and direct representation of that character, which is really useful to do that kind of thing. And then there's some more like there's some more.
Even beyond that, before we jump on to another one, right? Like, it's amazing. It's great because it paints this character in a very rich light. They're not just a pirate. They're a pirate that loves the town, and they will go out of their way, right, to show that. It gives them a little bit more depth and, I don't know, I think value, right? They're three-dimensional characters.
Well, another one that also to also just involve Gellin directly. There is one that says number 19 here. A horrible sea creature has been sighted, keeping many crews at the docks until it disappears. Anyone who tracks it down and slays it would be a hero. Gellin pledges a magic weapon to its slayer. So this involves the same character. This is someone who's generally very self-interested, but again, when the town's at stake, he's willing to, add his own personal motivation to ensure to its safety without any real direct reward for him other than, the safety of the harbor, which his own ships are in.
But yeah, that kind of stuff is great. It's a good way to really give, and I mean, there are plenty more of these that don't just tie into Gellin. So like some fishing crews have gone missing, or a fire breaks out, and these kind of things are ways to put these traditionalist faction, these characters, into the limelight so your players can interact with them and be introduced to that character who can tell them how they feel about local events and get the players involved and embroiled in what's going on. Because both sides are going to want the players to be joining up and helping their side.
And there's one last note on these just moving forward, because these are all throughout the book in different forms. They all have great interaction points. Like, these are great random encounters. You see the town, you see flowers and exotic fruits being handed up around the town. Your players are going to want to go and they want some exotic fruits. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Of course my character wants to grab a mango from this, flamboyant individual tossing them to people on the streets. In the same way, the monster showing up, that's a very direct, this is a quest if you want to take it. And all of them have threads where the players can engage both from a play standpoint while also learning more about the world.
And this is one of the great strengths of this book. Like Pete was saying, you see this all throughout. These little plot hooks, because these are plot hooks, they are everywhere, and they are all very good. There are very few plot hooks in this book that I see, and I'm like, all right, well, whatever. That's kind of a garbage plot hook. Would anyone actually bite that if they didn't realize it was some players will bite a bad plot hook just because they know it's a plot hook and they want to engage in the story. These feel very natural, right? Oh, there's a guy handing out fruit. Well, I want some fruit. Who the hell is the guy handing out fruit? Why is he handing out exotic fruit? It makes them ask questions and get engaged in an intellectual way. And that's why they're so good.
Yep. Consistently. Every one that we didn't read was also as good as the ones that we did.
Well, moving along. So once we were through with that beginning part, they talk a little bit about an overview of Saltmarsh in general and about the town.
Mm-hmm.
So it talks about the militia. How many soldiers are in the town, how well trained they are, how many people they can muster if they have to in a defense. And those are minor things, but they help to give a lot of context. The fact that Saltmarsh has, 500 standing soldiers? 100 standing soldiers, right?
That sounds correct to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was also just nice to have that number for population of the town because that's a thing that I never really think about when I'm building a town is I just don't understand what kind of population a fantasy town should have. Those small details are just really helpful for my own reckoning.
And just because something is you can look that up, right, and say oh, historically, what was it? But just because something is factually correct doesn't mean it makes sense from a normal person thinking about a fantasy town, mm-hmm. right? 5,000 humans that live in this town. I mean, mostly humans. 100 soldiers. Okay, sure. That checks out. No, I don't think any player is going to be I don't know about that. There's really that ratio. It's just not going to happen, I don't.
Yeah, agreed.
And
Maddie Morg said a comment in the chat I wanted to point out. All of this can seemingly be easily used as references for your own homebrew towns. Yep.
Absolutely.
100%. All of this, I'm definitely, the next time I make a coastal town, I'm going to take heavy inspiration from Saltmarsh, because this seems to set the standard now for how to make a really rich and interesting coastal town.
Well, and beyond that, even stuff like local law enforcement, right? The town arrests jailbreakers, and these are the basic punishments for these different types of crimes: petty crimes, minor crimes, and major crimes. That's great. It just gives you some basic examples of like how the town treats crime. And it's real. I mean, that's helpful for any village, whether you are playing in Saltmarsh or if you're making your own village, like Batty was just saying, right? Like, just having this as a reference gives you a good idea of, all right, what happened? A crime other than assault or property crimes that cause more than 50 gold in damages, but less than 250 are minor crimes. Awesome. It defines what the frick it is. Great.
And then what the appropriate punishment is. Because it always, like, I definitely always have this feeling as well when, like, the players commit a crime and you have to arrest them. Well, it's like, well, I guess you're just in jail now.
Yeah, right? Like, a lot of dungeon masters don't know where to go. And having this is a really good example of how it works. Like, and it makes sense.
It's less than it's just nice that they kind of explain this is kind of what the appropriate thing would be, because it's just a thing that a lot of people don't know naturally. Want to talk about some of the map, the town map, and like the locations in it? This was one of possibly my second favorite part of the book.
A return to the beautiful maps, the beautiful maps, the beautiful maps. Look at this beautiful map, fellas. We're back in the beautiful maps. I missed you so bad, beautiful maps, after being in Dragon Heist.
The Dragon Heist map is pretty. It just doesn't have the numbers on it. I think it looks okay. But the thing that's great is all those little circles with numbers on them, those are locations that are named and that have significance, and all of them have plot in them and interesting things to do, which are outlined in this next chapter, or not the same chapter, this next section of chapter 1.
Yeah, and a couple of awesome things just to note. All of the houses that are important, with, I guess, one exception, have blue roofs. Did you notice that?
I actually did not.
The only exception is this number 28 up here, and I have no idea why it doesn't have a blue roof. Actually, number 13 doesn't too.
Coincidence?
They're usually pretty good about that coloring.
Or they're in, I guess some of them are just in some other way significant by location or appearance. All of the houses.
I guess the forest doesn't have a blue roof. But
it'd be funny if they put blue trees right around the number. All right.
What do you want to talk about first, Pete?
I feel like let's talk about the overarching idea here. The thing that makes all of these little places great is that as you're moving through the details on them, they tell you a little bit about each numbered place, and the location isn't just like a physical description. It's also what in there is interesting to the players and could be interacted with from a more play-based perspective. To talk about one that I really like, there's one here called The Empty Net, which is the name of one of the taverns in town. There are several. At least 3, were there 4?
Where's The Empty Net? Which
The Empty Net is number 8.
I went the wrong way.
And I'm just gonna read this because these aren't also in particularly long. But here's The Empty Net. Partially supported by stilts driven into the harbor waters, this rickety tavern is purportedly a haven for smugglers, mercenaries, assassins, and even pirates. The owner, Kreb Schenker, neutral evil male human thug being a stat block that they tell you to use for him, takes coin from anyone who asks no questions. Troublemakers are thrown out the door, over the railing, and into the reeking harbor. Characters looking to carouse find this the best place for a rowdy night of drinking and brawling. The town guard comes here only if called. Kreb works with Gillen Prime Water to screen prospective buyers and sellers for smuggled wares. He also recruits local toughs and sailors for Gellen's ventures, but he prefers those who are business-minded and less likely to cause trouble. They give you so much to work with in that very brief description of this tavern. Yeah.
Like, 2 paragraphs, that's amazing. I could come up with an adventure like that off of those 2 paragraphs.
Absolutely. It's almost already an adventure.
Yeah. Wow.
And this is just one detail. They're all like this. Dude, what was your favorite of them? That was one of mine. My favorite personal one was Keladec Tower.
I mean, Keladec Tower was pretty good. This 3-story tower is home to the town's resident sage and wizard, Keladek the Unspoken. Lawful evil male human mage uses the mage stat block. Keladek's dusty skin, bald head, and bright red silk turban, not to mention his height of nearly 7 feet, makes him an unmistakable figure in town. First of all, I just love that they gave us the description of the character in that kind of vivid detail. It's a thing that a lot of dungeon masters, you watch Critical Role, you see Matt Mercer have these elegant descriptions for his NPCs. Well, here you go. Here's one. Here's one that the players will hear and they'll be like, oh, he's important.
Well, also not overdone too, because I feel like even Matt Mercer has a tendency to over-describe sometimes. This is like, he's tall, extremely tall, bald head, red turban. That's like iconic. I have a very strong mental image that's gonna stick.
Dusky skin's very good too.
Yeah,
just like, I just get an idea, like, ooh, kind of gives you the heat. Like the word dusky just gives you the heebie-jeebies a little. But anyway, Keladek came to town years ago from Ket, a distant kingdom held in a mix of contempt, mistrust, and fear by the locals. Rumor around town claims that speaking his name aloud allows Keladek to eavesdrop on a conversation for a short time. In truth, Keladek relies on his familiar, an imp named Zivmal, to spy on the townsfolk. Keladek's a close associate of Galen Primewall. He uses his magic to help a gang of smugglers based out of a nearby tower Tower of Xenopus in exchange for rare spell components and magical items. Beautiful. He has a place in the town, a reason to stay there. So many. Oh, it's a powerful wizard in this town, right?
We keep accidentally hitting on these Gelen tie-ins.
Well, accidentally. Some of like whenever I feel a player or a dungeon master puts a powerful wizard in the town, the question is always, why are they still there? Why is this wizard in the town?
Yep.
And he's got a very good reason. This Keladek the Unspoken. And the title, The Unspoken, is great. I love that, like, ooh, he can hear you if you speak his name.
And that feels like, that has that very, like, sailor, Saltmarsh, tall tale vibe to it. And then, the actual imp, the little imp that they tell him that goes around and spies for him, that's an adventure hook, too. Like, if they start interacting with, like, an opposing faction, because he is affiliated, if not, like, necessarily 100% an ideal, at least in practice, with the Loyalists, if there start being a lot of, not the Loyalists, the Traditionalists, if the players start interacting with the Loyalists a lot, that's the kind of thing where, well, maybe they start getting spied on by Zivmal the Imp.
Especially if they're important people in town.
And
I mean, after just completing 1 or 2 of these.
And there's 30 of these. There's 30 really cool locations like this in town. Again, they're all of, like, comparable quality. I don't think I know that we don't have time to go through pretty much all of these, but...
Yeah, and to answer a question in chat, Ivon was asking, are you going to compare them to the original adventures, the adventures in the book? No, we're not going to go into super great detail about the actual adventures. We're going to kind of briefly go over them. We just don't want to spoil too much, and it'd be impossible, I think, to do a 1-to-1 comparison without spoiling.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I want to talk about some of the downtime activities next, Jeremy.
Oh, my goodness. So, okay. Hold the phone. So I got to this section here, downtime activities, and my first thought was, oh, they just put the downtime activities from Xanathar's Guide in here, okay. But then they blew my fucking mind because they went through and they took all the downtime activities, or not all of them, but most of the downtime activities in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. They gave them unique and special flavor and how they could work in the setting of Saltmarsh. They gave them cool NPCs directly to tie into. For example, in buying and selling magic items.
Yeah, this is my favorite.
They introduced the magic item seller here. The Captain Zendros is of the faithful quartermasters of Euse, has magic items for sale, and can also broker the sale of magic items. Any such item comes with a mild... Oh, sorry, gonna have spoilers here. Any such item comes with a mild curse, however. Anyone attuned to the item can be targeted by a Detect Thought spell cast by Zendros with no limit on the range. Any saving throws triggered by the spell automatically fail, and the target has no knowledge of the casting. The curse can be detected by casting an Identify spell on the item and succeeding on a 25 Intelligence Arcana check. The check can be attempted once per casting. I love this. They're making this skeevy information broker, magic item seller. Oh, it's beautiful. It's a cool tie-in to make buying and selling a magic item feel unique and special for the setting of Saltmarsh, which is great. You know, it's wonderful. It gives so much more. If you're one of those dungeon masters who watches Critical Role and sees the cool shopkeeper NPCs, and you're like, I want to make a cool thing, and just not sure where to start to make a cool character, like Gilmore, for example, in Critical Role or whatever, or Bartholomew in D&D Time, wink. This is a really good place to start and to see written out a great example of how to do this. At least that's how I feel about it.
Agreed. That's all. I mean,
oh, right. Sorry, I hit on everything.
No, it's no problem. It's just really great in the downtime. Originally, it also has a flavor that is pretty unique, and it kind of contextualizes the way magic items are bought and sold. I've seen this in the previous downtime activities where there's this idea of them being brokered, and there's like a long process. It's not like a shop. It's more of like, you know, there's a bunch of contacts and there's individuals that need to be contacted and spoken with. And it gives you a little bit more mystique to the magic item purchasing. But when they did that in older when they did that in older versions of this buying and selling magic items things, without that person to kind of define it and do the job for you, it just felt very like confusing. But this just the addition of an NPC that it's associated with makes it so much cooler and so much more like tactile, and I want to do it as a player.
Well, it's also it's a really easy step-in point if you're new to making selling a magic item, this downtime activity, an engaging and interesting experience for your players. And if you're a more experienced dungeon master, they do all the work for you. It's amazing. Or you can run with this framework and make your own stuff in the same kind of style. They give you, it's just everything you need to make these downtime activities more engaging and more fun. Whether you're, you know, a 20-year I've been playing forever dungeon master, or if you're just stepping in, they give you everything you need in a clear and easy to understand way. And that's, again, what blows me away about this. Forget about all the other stuff they ended up doing. They added carousing. Yeah, I mean, carousing existed before, but they gave some specific situations about the different taverns, the kind of contacts you might make depending on where you carouse. And then, of course, we have details about these other carousers. We know what the empty net is like from the description of the empty net. And so we're just taking these simple activities and giving them just layers of depth.
Yep.
And I love that. Forget about this. I mean, there are special ones which are crazy.
Do you want to talk? Do you want to talk much about the region, Jeremy?
I mean, I just want to touch on, you know, they got mercenary work as an option for the downtime, and as you keep going, there's some other stuff. It's excellent. I was fishing. I know fishing was on here somewhere. Maybe I saw that somewhere else. Sorry. Yeah, let's talk about the region a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like we don't want to spend too much time on this because there's a lot of detail and it's excellent, but it's also just, you know, it describes some of the surrounding region. It gives you examples of the types of encounters that you would find there. It gives you flavor. It gives you some great story hooks. Some of them tied directly into, you know, some of the adventures in different places. Some of them don't. Some of them seem to just be kind of standalone areas that, like, the players may have to traverse this area. Here's what they'll expect to encounter. There's a lot more of these sort of, there's a bunch of random encounter tables, which are useful. But more than that, there's a lot of, for example, there's a section called the Drowned Forest, and there's a section called the Drowned Forest Oddities. So if you're going through this region, as a random encounter, you might find one of these oddities to just give some flavor to the region. And let me just read a couple of these because they're, again, all amazing. One, a human zombie is chained to a wooden stake driven into the ground. The remains of many other zombies lie nearby. A successful DC 10 intelligence, investigation, or wisdom survival check reveals evidence that the zombie is being used as target practice. So there's just a living zombie with a bunch of arrows in it and a bunch of dead zombies that people have just been firing arrows at to practice. Another one. A 20-foot diameter hut made from animal bones and dry branches looms out of the swamp. The floor of the hut is covered with humanoid teeth. Just a lot of really creepy things to put into your Drowned Forest to give it character and life, so it's not just you're describing you're walking through a forest. It's spooky.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of the locations, right? Because there's the drowned forest, but there's also the marshes, the Hool Marshes. There is down in this way the Dreadwood, and despite the fact that all of those places are just wilderness, they're all very unique wilderness with their own detail to them and their own
and kind of feel.
Yeah, exactly. They all have their own very unique feel. That was definitely the word I wanted. That they have their own personalities, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say another. I hate to keep harping on like the downtime stuff, but one of the things I love about it, right, is like a downtime activity might lead you to a guard, and that guard might have an adventure hook, right? Because there's so many, and they're all over the place here that because everything's so personalized, one thing can just tie into another. The days of hours of shopping are over. Now your shopping will be interrupted by an impromptu adventure to the Dreadwood or something. And those are exciting, I think. Side quests are abundant here in Saltmarsh, and it's great. But yeah, I mean, there are tons of awesome places in here. I really liked the Dreadwood simply because of the leaders of the Dreadwood, which I, again, don't want to go into a ton of detail. But one of the Dreadwood's most powerful denizens is a truly ancient night hag named Granny Nightshade, who dwells in the deepest depths of the forest. And we talk, it goes into
Granny Nightshade was cool.
All of Granny Nightshade's servants, the kind of creatures that serve her, her generals, where she lives, what it's like, and it's awesome. Like, it gives you so much extra detail to play off of, and it lets you just play off of them, which is the best part. It doesn't tell you like there actually. I don't think there really are any adventures that tie in with Granny Nightshade specifically. It just puts this
she's
here
just
for
there
you to play with, which is
awesome. She's very cool.
Absolutely. Anything else we want to touch on, or we want to move on to the next part?
There are details, but I think
there's so much to talk about here. I mean,
I think we can just move on to the backgrounds.
30 amazing pages.
And the backgrounds, I also don't think there's a ton to talk about in those. There are a couple of backgrounds that get a little bit.
There's a Fisher. That's what I was thinking
of. Yeah. There's the Fisher. There are little details on if you're playing a background like the folk hero. They give you a little table of things you can roll where you're a folk hero with something that ties into Saltmarsh instead of the options that usually give you. An example, you snuck aboard a sea prince's raiding ship and freed a number of captured fishers doomed to slavery in that realm. Anders Solmer, a prominent person in town, has been a friend ever since. So it gives you, just a little bit more direct Saltmarsh tie-in with your backgrounds. The Fisher is a unique one that's, I think, undone as of yet. And there's a couple of other unique ones. What else are there? There is the
smuggler. I know there are a couple of different types of smugglers from some other adventures. Shipwright is in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just great. There's a lot of great detail here that I'm so happy they took the time to. Now let's keep moving on because we're gonna get really behind. Oh my goodness, we're on to the first adventure, the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh. Now, Pete, I know you didn't go into too much detail with these because you don't want to spoil yourself.
To read.
But I did go through a little bit of detail. I want to talk about it briefly. And I'm going to talk on these in a very cursory manner. The adventures within this book are interesting. They have depth to them that some other adventures don't. They have nuance to them. For example, one of the adventures, to be left unnamed, is an espionage mission. It is not supposed to be go in and kill all the monsters. And that's amazing to me. I mean, I love that they actually have the cojones to put something like that into a module like this. I mean, it's a very bold move for them compared to some of their other adventures, which have been very much hack and slash, depending on which ones you do. But I love that. And the biggest thing I love about these adventures is they've tied them together. So the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh is a haunted house adventure. Awesome. That ties in to another adventure called Danger at Dunwater, which is about lizard folk and stuff. And that ties into the third adventure, The Final Enemy, which is all about Sahuagin and underwater foes. And they tie in a way that feels it works. It's natural. The progression between the adventures isn't required, but it works really easily. It's a tie-in that makes sense. That when you get to the end and the player's like, all right, what next? And they see, and one of the NPCs expresses the tie-in, says, oh, but this. The players will be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. We should go explore and investigate that. We need to do that. That's the obvious next step. And this is why this book, more than anything else, trashes Tales from the Yawning Portal. It's great. There are great adventures in that book, and I've played them and I've enjoyed them. But oh my goodness, the tie-ins are very good.
Yeah, and it does give some direct insight on how to do those in the book. It also gives you some insight on how to take the Tales from the Yawning Portal adventures and fit them into Saltmarsh, which is interesting as well.
Yeah, they actually took the time to tie the different Tales from the Yawning Portal adventures into this, which is just great. The other adventures in here, the other 4, also tie in that they are nautical themed adventures, which is great. They all seem like they're pretty damn good from what I've seen so far. I'm very excited to play them all. And actually, I see Ivalon in chat. Yes, the first 3 adventures were all written by TSR UK, which is known for their quality. The original module code, U, standing for underwater, became UK because of TSR UK. There you go. And honestly, it's just great. The quality is very high. The nuance is there. The intrigue is there. The excitement of it is there. Very nice. The one downside, I'd say, is, well, we're going to get to that in a minute, but some of the random encounters you might run into, which they give you a huge list of stuff in the back.
Well, let's move on to Appendix A, because Jeremy, we only have 15 minutes left.
Holy moly. All right, we're going to skip past all the adventures because we're just not going to go into great detail on them. We don't want to spoil that for you. In the future, if people want, we could go through each adventure and give you a rundown and everything. Let us know, because that's important. Yeah, we would love to know if that's what you want us to do. Tell us and we'll do it, because I would love to go through these adventures. Appendix A of Ships and Sea. Pete, you want to lead us?
Appendix A. Yes, Appendix A begins with a discussion of ships, and it basically puts out a bunch of different stat blocks for ships, defines how they work, how they move, how you control them, the different attributes that a ship might have. They go into a lot of detail. I don't think we'll talk about like some of the specific mechanics, save for in looking at the stat block. Jeremy, if you don't mind scrolling down, we can look at our first ship stat block. And the first ship they present here is a great one. It is the galley. It is one of the larger. Is it the largest one they give you, or is the military vessel the warship?
It might be 130 feet. I think it's pretty dang close.
Regardless, it's a very big ship, and it has a whole bunch of different stuff it can do. But unlike normal stat blocks, there are a lot of details on the ship stat blocks that are unique to ships. For example, instead of putting forth direct HP at the top here, we have some just tools that are going to be very useful for you as a dungeon master to figure out what you can do with these ships. So, creature capacity. This ship can hold 80 crew members and 40 passengers. 80 people that are actively working to make the ship move and function properly, and 40 people that are just kind of milling around in presumably quarters underneath. Above it, for the record, it also has some like extra information about the ship that's cool before we get into it. There's things like, there's the ceilings, which is the height of the rooms as you move through the various floors. It outlines the floors. It outlines the type of crew you would expect to find within the ship. For an example galley crew it gives you are 20 guards, 12 siege engineers, 42 sailors, 5 officers, and a captain. And it gives you the stat blocks to use for each of those from the monster manual. It also says the ship has rigging, so if you want to climb the sails, you can do so without making any checks. You can just climb up the rigging because it's trivial. And it's got lots of other kind of minor details along those veins. And then, in the ship proper, it talks about, like I said, the crew size. It talks about the amount of cargo it can hold. It talks about its travel pace. Rather than giving it a baseline speed, it moves at 4 miles per hour, which means in the average day, the ship can go 96 miles, which I think is a lot more useful than it goes 30 feet.
Yeah.
Great detail to have added. Jeremy, do you want to talk more about the ship stat blocks here? Because they have some cool mechanics too.
Yeah, so very much like if you were familiar with the Unearthed Arcana that was talking about ships, it follows the same idea, where the ship is broken up into components. It has a hull, it has how you control it, which is usually the helm, it has movement options. In the galley's case, it has oars and sails. It has weapons, and it has... That's it, actually. That's everything. It might have something special, if it has something special. And I like the mechanics of how they have just said ship combat works like this. And that is, the galley can take a number of actions. In this case, the galley can take 3, choosing from the options below. It can only take 2 actions if it has fewer than 40 crew, and 1 action if it has fewer than 20. It can't take these actions if it has fewer than... And that's great, because that tells you 3 is the skeleton crew. The minimum you need to move on a galley is 3. And things like where it says ballistas 4 here. That means you can take that action up to 4 times. It's simple. It makes sense. So if you want it, well, there are 4, whatever. So you can take it up to 3 times because you can only have 3 actions. And I like that as a strategy in combat, whereas you can only use the sails once. Rather than sticking to the action movement bonus action that player characters are adhered to, I like that they didn't go in that direction and they stuck with this. It's got 3 things. You can use them a number of times equals the number of times it says you can use it. Option. I really dig that.
Agreed.
I mean,
I love
that's about it.
I love the damage and the health on them is really the thing that I love too. It's just it's well designed.
Yeah, all of the different components have different amounts of health. So there's some strategy to maybe attacking certain parts of the ship over others. The one thing it didn't quite do for me is it didn't talk about how to adjudicate area of effect spells like a fireball in terms of how it would affect different components of the galley. It talks about how it would affect the crew later on, and great, I'm glad it added that. But that's still the one part I'm not 100% certain on, or maybe I missed it.
And maybe it's just presumed that it affects the parts of the boat, because they also give you like diagrams of all of these boats and where the different components are. So maybe it's to be assumed that you have to
hit everything it would hit. Yeah, maybe. I'd love to see, because ballistas have 50 health each. I'd love to see just a ballista just fire it all for the ballistas and they're all gone. Just would feel really good as that fireball wielder. But all of the mechanics, they talk specifically about how they work, right? Speed, so this is in combat speed. Oars can move you 30 feet, but require a lot of crew. Sails can move you 35 feet, but less or more depending on the wind. And it works out pretty well.
So, Jeremy, I want to talk about my favorite thing in the book that I read.
All right.
And these are the superior ship upgrades.
Okay, so they have stat blocks for the keelboat, for the galley, for a long ship, a rowboat, all sorts of stuff is in here. There is actually a typo in one of the ships.
Oh no! What happened? I did not catch it.
Yeah. The keelboat has a crew of 3, according to this gargantuan 60-foot long, 20-foot wide vessel.
Probably 30.
Yeah, it's supposed to be 30. But I can forgive that because the rest of the book is so good.
Just how could you, wizard? I mean, actually, a little bit. How could you, wizards?
I mean, a little bit. That's an easy one.
Yeah.
But
I want to talk about the superior ship upgrades because they're absolutely amazing, and I love them.
We're gonna skip past officers and crew. I guess it makes sense. We'll talk about them after.
Yeah. And also, we're getting real tight. The The superior ship upgrades. Basically, you can get one of these absolutely radical upgrades to your ship for 15,000 gold pieces, and it takes 1d4 weeks. And I assume there's also going to be, if I was running these, I wouldn't just make them like, all right, you don't go to the local shipwright and give them 15k. Yeah, you would have to go on a quest to get any of these because they're incredible. Just to name some of them, things like the churning hull, the death vessel, the frostlock hull, the ever full sails. So the ever full sails is a cool one. These billowing sails are woven from cloud stuff drawn from the elemental plane of air. Wind wisps and whistles around them, allowing the ship to move at the speed of 60 feet, regardless of direction relative to the wind. Your ship has the wind at its back at all times. Ivalon says, I used to play bass for Death Vessel.
I mean, really, though. Good. Yeah.
Things like screaming sails. The sails are woven from the energy of captured wraiths and bound with the spirit of a banshee. And basically, to not read the whole thing, it allows the sails to let out this terrible, terrible scream that deals psychic damage and scares people that aren't basically part of the crew. And there are tons of these. All of them are really cool, and all of them feel like they're less for the players and more for you to make cool enemy ships with, for the players to encounter, for them to be jealous of the enemy's clockwork oars, for example.
Yeah, I mean, they're awesome for everything, right? Like,
yep.
Using these, you could really entice some players, like, oh, they're not really engaging with they're not really loving the ship that they got, and they're kind of bored with it. Well, what if they get a cool quest that could get them scything oars, right? Like, they might be into that now.
What if they get the guardian figurehead that animates as like an iron golem? Like,
that's baller. Holy Jesus.
Or it's maybe a stone golem. It doesn't specify. It's just a golem.
I think it says iron golem, doesn't it? Yeah, an iron golem. Yeah, so you're right. But anyway, they're awesome. We're not going to go into all of them because it takes so long. But
this is one of the coolest things in the book.
Yeah, to make ships really feel unique. They gave a bunch of ship special officer roles that you can give to players or NPCs. Great way of making NPCs feel special is to give them an officer role. And a great way to make a player feel special is to give them an officer role. The officers, they're captain, first mate, bosun, cook, doctor?
Doctor's not it. Surgeon.
Surgeon, son of a gun. And what's awesome about these is they tie these roles in to everything. They tie them into combat. There are special roles like take aim or full speed ahead that certain roles can use, like the captain, first mate, and bosun can use these actions in combat to empower the ship, which they do what you think they do.
Yep.
Take aim and full speed ahead.
But these special actions, just adding that extra layer of mechanic is cool. It's cool, and it will be fun, and the players will, when they become the captain of the ship, and they can, the first time your player gets to say, full speed ahead, they're going to be so excited, and they're going to feel very in the moment, and you're going to be glad they put that mechanic in.
Well, and beyond that, they continue to tie those roles in with travel at sea. They go through, and travel at sea, this is a nice long section that gives a ton of detail about how to adjudicate sea travel on a day-to-day basis, how to deal with various threats and challenges that may arise, how to deal with crew morale, how to track that and everything. And it's really, really cool because they come up with ways to have these crew roles interact, like how to deal with certain hazards or crew conflicts. Well, maybe the cook, for example, is really good at boosting morale. So is the first mate. But, the captain and the bosun are pretty, that's not really their strong suit. At the same time, if you run into, for example, a fire on deck, right? Maybe, or a fire's probably a bad example. Like a whirlpool, for example, as a hazard you might deal with. The captain has special things to help get the ship out of that, to direct and be a captain.
Yeah, and there's tons of these. They're cool. There's a lot of really cool ones. I like Eldritch Mist was an interesting one where there's like different types of fog that might have different effects, like a wild magic fog that causes wild magic surges. A lot of really cool kind of threats here. Do we want to talk about the encounters?
Well, one last thing before we move on. On all of these threats, they also tell you how long each round of dealing with the threat accounts for in real life time. So, for example, in fire, right, when you're making these rolls to deal with the fire that may have started on the ship, and maybe it's from an enemy fireball during combat, maybe, which is terrifying because now you have to deal with the fire after combat. Maybe it is just a random event that happens, right, because someone knocks over a candle. They tell you that, where is it? Each round, the group check represents 5 minutes of work. And I love that because in tense situations where a fire is burning and you know what the worst case scenario of that fire burning is because it's in this table, which, God, we haven't even talked about. They added
so
relative success to D&D, something that is amazing.
But Jeremy, that's not in D&D.
I know. So there's a total success, there's just a success, there's a failure, and there's a total failure. And I love that because knowing a fire is going on, if a fireball blasts the cabin and the ship is on fire and the players are in battle and they don't stop to put out the fire, oh man, that's a total failure. And because no one's stopping to put the fire out. And so you can apply that effect of the fire and knowing how to do that, because how the hell are you supposed to deal with a fireball gets cast and your ship is on fire?
The answer is make these checks as per the
book. This is how
the book tells you.
And I love that. So yeah, sorry, moving on because we gotta jump through.
We're gonna fly.
They're awesome hazards. And,
a whole bunch of random encounters. Jeremy, you mentioned you had
and
some
ocean
issues.
Environments. Oh my goodness, how to deal with like pressure and pressure for objects under the ocean.
I really liked the mysterious islands.
I really like the lure lights. That made me very.
The lure lights were
really cool.
Yep.
Which crap, we're so much to talk about. Let's talk about the random encounters. Okay, so random encounters. This is the one part I'd say that maybe. Well, actually, even then they have them separated by levels, but it's interesting because levels aren't necessarily player levels here. They take the time to say that the low level table, levels 1 through 4, is useful for commonly traveled waters or safe waters, where higher level tables are more suited for primeval waters, far from well-trafficked sea lanes. These aren't just for player levels, and I think that's cool.
Yeah, I agree.
There are also some really fun random encounters you can get.
There's also like, you can come across a random ship, and then they also have a fun little table to roll ship names. Like, here's a random ship that I'm just going to pick. There's the Dandy Dragon. It's a fun, cute ship name that you can have randomly rolled on this. The Salty Wanderer.
I like the Dandy Barnacle personally, but
Dandy's obviously the best one.
It's a very, very good one.
How about the Sinful Shark?
Oh, I think that one's a smuggling ship, right?
Oh yeah,
kind of gives it away though.
Yeah, it's too on the nose. Yeah, but that's it. There's random encounters. There's mysterious islands.
Okay, so let's go down to the mysterious islands because I know you want to talk about those, and they're great.
I don't feel like we need to talk about them too much. Basically, they use the same. I love them, and there's so much here that we could talk about. Basically, they use a lot of the same ideas that we were talking about back in the town and back when they were doing those like in Saltmarsh random encounters where there's just little kind of adventure hooks that they give you to put you on a path when you come across a random island. So here's, you come across, for example, a hostile island. So you decide that you want the island to be a hostile one. You can roll for the leader. You can roll for the leader's motivations. Get some inhabitants, and then the story hook. The island's leader killed an NPCs the characters admired. The island's leader has a headband of intellect. The characters are challenged by rivals to survive a night on the island. An eloquent invitation from the island's leader invites the characters for a hunt. And it just gives a cool way to quickly generate an entire story off of you find an island, which is what ocean travel and exploration, it's what makes it interesting and fun.
And I mean, this is just so great because if you've ever, let's be real, if you're in this channel, you've probably made a character for 5th edition D&D before. If you haven't, welcome, and we're glad to see you. But if you've made a character for 5th edition D&D and you've ever gone through to the background section and be like, oh, this wasn't really in other editions, and you rolled some random background stuff and you thought, wow, I'm really inspired by this. And it's just 3 or 4 tables with 4 or 5 different options each. And it just inspired the absolute hell out of you. That is what these are. They are a ton of little tables that are easy to understand, easy to digest. It's not one huge 10,000 option table that you're going to roll and be like, what? No, it's very good. And all of, like Pete was saying, and we have reiterated so many times, all of them are great. Not like all of them are pretty good, not all of them are acceptable, all of them are great. Sanctum Island, Alien Island, Hostile Islands,
I love the
Cursed
Wild
Islands. Yeah, I mean, everything. Oh, yeah, Welcoming Island, Wild Islands, everything's amazing. Everything is so good and so rich and flush with inspiration that it's like, it's just so easy to use and to understand, especially on the fly. If your players are having a good time and they have just come off a really hard combat and they're happy about it, and you don't want to throw a combat encounter at them at that random island, boom, it takes 30 seconds, you roll up a welcoming island, you're there. Or if they're bored and they want combat, oh yeah, they come across a hostile island. Boom, you're
Beast, done. Wild Island.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff. Tons of stuff. Let's talk Rex. Let's talk Rex and adventures. Yeah. There's a bunch of adventures in this section of the book. In the appendix, they give you like 7 or even 8. There's like a bunch of them. There's a bunch of these just very short mini adventures that tie into Saltmarsh, that tie into the whole region. Some names here: Tentacle Trap. I like this one. Worshippers of Kalushladuk, which sounds like some fish god. And it gives you the basic story hook. It gives you kind of a simple progression of how to run the adventure. Just really brief, crisp adventure ideas, not like the full larger scale adventures that you're going to see in...
It gives you maps.
Yeah, it gives you maps.
It goddamn gives you maps for these random, unincorporated adventures.
These adventures are like random encounter. These adventures are kind of almost like DnDTime one-shots, where you can just have one to throw out and just kind of do.
The best thing about this, right, because it's about, it's all for like, for travel at sea, adventure at sea. Like, let's say you're playing a game and you got your normal group of players and you're all having a great time. And you get to a point where you're like, oh man, so-and-so can't be here tonight. All right, cool. Wow, you come across some ancient ruins. You see them just now near the shallower part of the ocean, and you can see down far enough beneath the murky depths. Boom, that's what this is. This is your one shot for that night, because that player can't get there. It works contiguously within the story, and it gives you enough to work off of where if you want to flesh it out into a full thing, you can. They give you so much in so little. You have to put in so little effort to get so much inspiration out of it, and it's amazing. I have mad respect for this.
But I should ask, because I'm assuming all these maps are completely available if you get the Roll20 module? Probably.
Almost certainly. I'd be shocked if they weren't. But don't quote me on that. Make sure it says the maps in Appendix A, or just send our message.
And that's kind of it. There's a bunch of these adventures, and then at the end...
the magic items.
Then at the end, there's the magic items and the monsters.
Wow.
The monsters are obviously going to be relevant to the adventures, and if they use a monster that's not in the monster manual, they put it in the Appendix C. Appendix B uses, presumably these are magic items that are given out somewhere over the course of the adventure.
Yeah.
And there's some cool ones here. I'm a big fan of the Pipe of Remembrance, which is a common magic item, where it's a pipe that you blow smoke, and the smoke comes out and reenacts, like, basically a play of your greatest and most heroic achievements.
Just awesome. There's a lot of really cool flavor in here.
Yep. Pressure capsule is just a nice, like, catch-all, buy a pressure capsule, swim deep underwater. They needed it to make probably a lot of stuff work.
Yeah, I mean, Helm of Underwater Action. You know what that does. Lastly, and I think this is the last thing we're going to touch on, we're going to be real fast. Monsters and NPCs. There are a ton of creatures in here. We're not going to go under and talk about most of them, or like almost any of them. But there's one that I really want to talk about, Pete. And if you're cool.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead.
And that is the same place we started,
one.
the Lakatha.
Oh yeah.
So look at this boy. Look at him. He's so cute. I love him. Oh, it's amazing. I love Lokatha, and we actually aren't on their stat block here. And these resilient and proud fish folk found in the danger at Dunwater have endured slavery, war, and mistreatment at the hands of other aquatic creatures. They dwell in submerged tribal communities along seacoasts and hunt both above and below water. So you might just have your characters land in Saltmarsh and they just see one of these fuckers just walking along the shore with like a spear. And it's like, what's going on? Or he's got like a shovel and he's digging for clams or something. Just how they look was enough to just inspire the hell out of me.
You know what one of my favorite things about the Lokatha is?
Sure, hit me.
They speak common.
I know, they just talk. It's amazing. And also, I like also
they give you more bullywugs.
Yeah, I love that. Giving a bit more diversity to common monster types like bullywugs. It's just good. It's just good.
There's a baby
I will admit. Yeah, oh my god, the baby kraken's so cute. We gotta go look at that. What is it? The adolescent, or not adolescent kraken. Juvenile kraken.
Does it have a picture of it?
I thought it did. Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't think it does.
All right, maybe I'm mistaken. Kraken. Yeah, I don't know. But
it's in there and it's cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. Everything's very cool. It's very good.
Those guys are righteous.
Oh yeah, wait, that's not a kraken.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
everything's excellent. That's all.
And that's it. That's the book. It's good. If you like to run games, then this is a good book to own.
If you can't tell just by how Pete and I are having a great amount of difficulty, right? Just expressing how much we love this book and focusing on talking about specifics, just because everything is so good. There's little in this book that I'm unhappy with. The only downside is that on a few of the random encounter tables that you'd find earlier on, or in exploring underwater or whatever, or in some of the hazard tables and things where there are monsters, some of them it's yeah, all right, a couple water elementals or some Sahuagin, and then you roll a 20, all right, a storm giant. Some of them are really big, and for an inexperienced DM, they might think, oh, they got to fight this thing because it's a random encounter. Whereas an experienced dungeon master would realize maybe they don't have to fight it, maybe something else because of this. Maybe this creature wants them to serve it instead, or something like that. Or maybe it needs help, right? But that's the one tiny, if I had to nitpick, it would be that.
Pick it in there.
Yeah, and I mean, that's one hell of a nitpick. How about you, Pete? What do you have? Any nitpicks at all?
Do I have a nit to pick? I honestly, I just can't really think of anything. I don't have a nit.
All right. Well, everyone, the nits have been picked. It is time for us to move on and be done with this brief overview of Saltmarsh then. As before, if you would like to see more of the Ghosts of Saltmarsh, if you want to see us look at the other adventures, let us know. We're not currently planning on going through each adventure, but if that's something that you want to see, let us know, and we'll think about it. However, shall we move on to our final segment, Pete, of tonight's show?
Yeah, absolutely. We're about to move into Ask Pete and Jeremy. Ask Pete and Jeremy is a segment where we just answer questions that people have in the Discord. And our first question today comes from Creativity, who asks, have you ever played a mature campaign? If so, how far do you usually take it? And if you are in a mature game, how do you make it known if something being done makes you uncomfortable? My answer to that is, I don't know if you have, I never have played in, at least long term. I've definitely played a couple of sessions in different games that were a little bit more, maybe a little bit more graphic or intense in kind of the way that they're played. But I've never played a long-term campaign of that type.
Yeah, I mean, I've played in campaigns that did have, sex as a theme in the game, but it was not like a core theme of the game. It just happened in the game, and things like that. Yeah, I think the core aspect, whenever you're dealing with a sensitive nature like that, or a sensitive topic, is you have to talk about it. As a group, you have to sit down with your group, and before, whether you're a player or a dungeon master, or if you're anyone at the table who sees it happening or starting to happen, that kind of sexual or mature nature, if you want to call it, you have to take a minute and interrupt and be like, hey, look, guys. Oh, looks like we dropped a bunch of frames just then.
Yeah, your voice just got very bad too. Did mine as well?
Yeah, no, you sound fine.
Oh, you're back.
All right, it looks like we're kind of coming back here. We dropped a frame for a second there. Sorry, folks. Yeah, Sheba's got it perfectly in the chat. Whenever you see this stuff happening, you need to talk about it. You need to take a minute. You need to say, pump the brakes, guys. Let's talk about this. If you're a player at the table, even if you're comfortable with it happening between other players and the Dungeon Master or other players and NPCs and each other or whatever, still bring it up because someone at the table might not be.
Yeah.
And it's really important to have those kinds of conversations because that's just, as with all things, the most important facet of mature topics is consent. And that includes at the table. Everyone at the table has to be okay with that. And if they're not, then it's not all right. No matter if everyone is fine, but one person, still not okay. And maybe the conversation becomes, all right, well, this is something we want to do. And maybe that person steps out of the game. And I feel like that's very drastic, but, it's important to realize that is, I think, the most important thing. And pump the brakes when it's going to happen. When you see that kind of thing moving in that direction and talk about it.
And as a player, if you're in the position where something's being done that's making you particularly uncomfortable, and because sometimes it's hard to speak out in that situation, I think a great thing to do is also, if you're not really feeling confident enough in yourself to express that, at least speak to after the game or at the earliest possible convenience. Even if you can just say, hey, can we take a break for a little while and speak to the DM about it in private and say, hey, I want to have a discussion about this. I didn't want to bring it up in front of everyone, but don't let yourself be in a situation in a game ever. Don't let that kind of go on without speaking about it. Even if that's something that makes you nervous, sometimes you just gotta bite the bullet and just do it.
Well, and here's the thing about it, right? If you're playing Dungeons & Dragons, people, I'd say 9 out of 10 times, maybe even more than 9 out of 10 times, you're sitting down to play a game and have fun together as a group. And I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like most groups, their selling point isn't sex. I feel like that's not the case in most Dungeons & Dragons games. So if that's happening and you do feel uncomfortable, you're afraid that the other players will, be upset with me if I bring this up, or they probably won't. They'll probably feel bad that they made you uncomfortable.
For sure.
And if they don't feel at least a little bad, it's kind of like, you're supposed to be sitting down hanging out with your friends. So that's my personal feelings on it. Oh, I'd always bring it up. And especially if you do feel too uncomfortable, bring it up specifically to the Dungeon Master or to the people involved specifically, if you're in a larger.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So let's move on to our next question, which is one from Maddie Morgs. You just rolled an 18 and your DM says you failed at the event. What happened in or out of character?
Interesting. So I think what Maddie is saying here is, what can I handle out of character, Pete, and you can handle in?
Okay, yeah, sure.
Okay, out of character. What the fuck? All right, go ahead, your turn.
How come? Why can't I scare this old man with my +5 to intimidation?
No, that's out of character.
Oh well, no, I'm getting to it.
You're doing in character.
I'm getting to it.
Oh.
With my +5 addition and my 18 of 23. This old man is secretly a dragon.
Oh, okay.
You make that conclusion in characters. You say, "Oh, this person is actually a dragon."
I tease, of course, but yeah. I also think would be a good one in character, right? You just describe how amazing you do, and then also just describe how more amazing the other person is, or whatever other character beats you, or what have.
Morgs says, "Would you rule that salt water is poison? And if so, can dwarves or others, even those immune like Wan Ti, drink it without repercussion?" If a player playing Yuan Ti wanted to do that, I would rule probably in their favor. I wouldn't say that salt water would be good for them, and it wouldn't probably give them the necessary sustainable life sources. But if they wanted to make a show of it, yeah, I'd probably count it.
Pump the brakes. I disagree fundamentally here. I don't think salt water is poison. I think salt water, because when you drink salt water, right? No, here's the deal. When you drink salt water,
this is your area of expertise.
You get sick, right? You follow?
You're saying it's disease?
I think salt water would fall under disease in the context of 5th edition. Because you get sick because of all the stuff in the salt water, I think, right? And like, I think that falls under the purview of disease in 5e. And so paladins could drink salt water without any repercussion.
Also, the salt kind of directly kind of messes up the benefits of the water.
Oh yeah, no, I would argue you get no benefit of having drank water.
Yeah, so it just doesn't. Yeah. I would just rule that it wouldn't. That's there it is.
I would say that paladins could drink salt water without feeling sick, though. I'm sorry, they would still feel crappy, but they'd feel a lot less crappy having drank a gallon of salt water.
Would you rule that purify food and drink works on salt water?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
I would definitely say so.
I think so too. Ivalon, do Warforged... Yeah, thank you, Maddie, for the questions. Ivalon, do Warforged dream of electric sheep? Yeah.
Yeah, I think just by definition they have to, right? Wait, Warforged don't dream. They go into periods of inactivity lasting for 8 hours. Nice trick.
I'm maintaining my yes.
Okay.
Crowley asks a whole bunch of questions. Oh my god. Who is your least favorite character of all time? Not a D&D character. Crowley, stop typing. That's your last. This last one that's already out is your last one. Who is your least favorite character of all time? Not a D&D character, but other media.
Oh God, really?
That's brutal. I have an answer and I just can't place it.
I don't have an answer and I can't place it.
It's like I have an answer that's like a Jar Jar Binks. I have actually nothing against Jar Jar Binks. He's fine. Hot take right there, spicy take. But I have a character that's like
Jar Jar.
Yeah,
and Teen Anakin's worse than Jar Jar.
Teen Anakin is way worse than Kid Anakin. But yeah, I have one that's like that for a different series, and I just can't place it at the moment. So maybe we'll find it. I can't think of a dumb good question. Wait, so what's your dumb? What's a dumb good?
Dumb good question. And what is my answer to that question?
How many? Jeremy, here's my question. How many?
Fish sticks.
What's your favorite type of cookie?
I like cookies.
Do you like them?
Yeah.
I like chocolate chip cookies. Standard.
I do too. Oh wait, that was an actual question. I'm sorry. I thought that was another dumb question.
No, that was just the next question.
Yeah, I like chocolate chip cookies.
What's your favorite type of muffin? My answer is going to be like a coffee cake muffin.
I like the corn muffins.
What's your favorite dessert?
That one's a tough one. I'm going through like a dessertomorphosis right now, where certain desserts just are not appealing to me like they used to. I used to be like a chocolate fiend, so that answer used to be something like a chocolate peanut butter cheesecake or something. But I'm going in a new direction. My horizons have shifted. I'm not sure what the answer to that is currently.
Favorite
sweet guy.
Favorite dessert, special occasion dessert. My mom makes a Oh wait, but my grandmother also makes. My grandmother makes a German apple pie that's brutal. It's not even a pie. It's more like an apple cake with like a cream cheese frosting. It's incredible. Day to day, I like vanilla ice cream.
What is your most exotic or abnormal form of meat you would be willing to eat? Right.
There's no meat I wouldn't try once, excluding like a bug meat.
Ew. That's repulsive. I don't think I'd eat person.
Oh yeah, never mind. That's a good point. I was counting that as not an option.
Like octopus, probably.
You've probably had octopus before, haven't you? Had calamari, or
I know I like it, but it's kind of weird. It's not like meat like normal meats.
A friend of mine ate lion once.
That's weird.
He spent like $50 on a lion steak. Yeah. Have you ever purposefully eaten a bug? The answer is yes. I've eaten a moth.
When I was a youngin, I used to mow down on bugs, or so I'm told, which is disgusting and repulsive to me right now. And that just at my core, it's repulsive to me. I hate bugs so much.
You don't just get a nice spider snack?
Yum, 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 yum.
If you could make a zoo from D&D creatures, what would be the first first 5 monsters you would want to get for your zoo?
I've done this. I've did this for D&D time.
Back and forth seas. Well, no, this is like a real one, not one that's designed to be terrifying. Number 1, blink dog.
How do you can't put a blink dog in a zoo?
You get a magic blink dog. You can't put anything from D&D in a zoo.
False. Displacer beast.
How do you know you got it?
They don't actually teleport. They just displace.
I know. So how do you know you didn't just put the illusion in the zoo?
Oh fuck! I'll know in like a couple days if it's still there.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't know if we're gonna do 5. I'll do one.
Yeah,
more.
Like a good zoo. Oh, nice, Farfel. I'd also put an owl bear in there. I'd put one of these. Actually, these Lokatha are sentient, so I couldn't do that.
I'd put a cube in. I'd put in a cube.
Yeah, we definitely need a cube.
I think it'd be really fun to throw things at the cube and then watch them just kind of dissolve into it.
Dude, cube feeding time would be the craziest.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's more stuff.
Yeah, name one good reason to not always kill any injured old man you find in a dungeon. Decency, humanity, morality. Good.
Yeah.
Maintaining a good alignment, if you so desire to do that.
Oh my god, I just have to give people magic weapons that will only attune to them if they're lawful good not as lawful good, just a good alignment, and then we can prevent them from killing. No, that's a good reason, Farfel. If you're tuned to an item that requires you to have a good alignment, those are very good reasons. That's the only reason.
Crowley, his final question is actually very related to the Displacer Beast conundrum. I think we've covered this. It'd be tough, is the answer.
Do you think a Displacer Beast exhibit at your D&D zoo that would make people sick? No, I think you got to just leave it the way it is, like natural. You just have big signs that like are warning people who have like motion sickness or
like epilepsy.
Yeah, you just need a lot of signs and probably like a staff person. Maybe you make it a ticketed exhibit.
Yeah, and that's that.
I would say you're probably lawful good if you're killing old men in a dungeon. Well, agree to disagree, Farfel.
I would say that unless you know that, like, well, you didn't mention that the old man in the dungeon had a journal that he'd written where he described all the atrocities he'd committed. That's D&D Time Talks.
Anywho, thank you all for joining us. Thank you for hanging out and being a part of this fun little talk. I hope you enjoyed the Lokatha. I certainly did. I hope you also enjoyed all the rest of our awesome stuff going on. Yeah, thanks for hanging out, for watching. We're going to be on a bit of a pseudo hiatus, one might say, for the next 2 weeks. So this Friday, there will be no Pete and Jeremy's D&D time. However, on Sunday, there's going to be a very special D&D time brews. Pete, you want to talk about it?
D&D time brews on Sunday is going to be me and Crowley. And we're going to be doing something. Yeah. We're going to be doing something very fun. I'm not going to tell you what it is right now, but it's going to be really goofy. If you've tuned into the last D&D Time Brews with me and Crowley, I'll give you a hint that it connects to something we did then. And that is all I will say. It's probably really easy to guess from that. So,
wait, Pete, I can't guess it. You should tell me.
Oh no, Jeremy, I guess you'll just have to tune in like everyone else.
But Pete, I don't know how to tune. How do you tune?
I'm sure I could make a guitar joke, but I don't have it in me.
What? Anyway. What else we got going on, Pete?
Yes, tune on Sunday to that. Tune in next week for our other regular content. It's going to be D&D Time. It's going to be D&D Time Talks on Wednesday. I'll be doing something on that day. It might not be just like a regular episode of D&D Time Talks because it's going to be just me. And then on Friday, also, I think I can say with certainty now that even though we're not going to be doing Pete and Jeremy's D&D Time, I am also going to be running something on that Friday. It might be a game. It might be a game that has people from D&D Time in it that will have like a sign up. I don't have everything locked in yet.
Are you still thinking about the thing that we were talking about last time?
I am still thinking about.
Oh boy, you guys are in for a treat.
It's going to be something. It's going to be something goofy, and it's going to involve participation with the community in some form or another. And then on Sunday, you're going to be back for Waterdeep.
Waterdeep Dragon Heist. Yeah, it's going to be great. So really, we're missing only one day. Not that bad.
Yeah.
Thank you all for hanging out, for being a part of the network, for being part of this awesome community. Thank you especially to Thunder Lily for the follow.
Thank you so much, Thunder Lily.
We hope you enjoy our other content. And thank you to Farful resubscribing with Twitch Prime for 16 months with the message "Kill old men in dungeons."
To each their own. Thank you very much for your subscription.
Thank you. We're gonna just wait. Is it only old men? So if I stock my dungeon with like injured old halflings, it's fine. You won't kill them. Anywho, thank you all for watching. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Pete, and this is
D&D Time Talks.
Thank
Good
you.
night.